Hi, everybody, it's Tim, and this is What I Saw When I Saw Coffy. If you haven't seen the movie Coffy, I encourage you to do so before watching this video. There are going to be spoilers ahead. And as with all the videos I make for this channel, I'm not suggesting that what I see in these movies is the only way to interpret them, nor am I arguing that what I see reflects the intentions of the writers or filmmakers. Coffy, released in 1973, stars Pam Grier as a woman named Flower Child Coffin, Coffin, or Coffy for short. She is an ER nurse turned vigilante and avenging angel. And in the narrative landscape of this movie, the police are on the take, local government officials are in league with mobsters, and children as young as 9 years old are junkies. That is pretty grim, but if things weren't so grim, Coffy's vengeance might not be as gratifying. A theme that pervades this movie is that people and things are not what they appear to be. Writer-director Jack Hill dramatizes this theme with sardonic wit, as when we see congressional candidate Howard Brunswick followed by what appear to be ordinary citizens and news cameras, only to find out that he is filming a commercial for himself, and the appreciative crowd are all actors. The director, calling cut, tells Howard that his impassioned speech about the need for political action for black people was real convincing. Not convincing as an argument, but as a performance. What interested me most about the movie Coffy, what I kept thinking about long after I'd watched it, were choices that writer-director Jack Hill made for the character Arturo Vetroni, the mobster kingpin who is muscling his way into the local drug and prostitution business. Jack Hill could have written Vetroni as a by-the-numbers final boss to be defeated at the movie's climax, but instead he gives Vetroni's character an added dimension that I think is worth exploring. We hear about Vetroni before we meet him. When Coffy visits Priscilla, a former call girl for the pimp King George, Priscilla describes Vetroni as a little freaky. It is one thing to have a sexual kink. It's quite another thing when you are unable to become aroused without that particular kink. According to Priscilla, that is the case with Vetroni. Priscilla tells Coffy that Vetroni likes a girl he thinks is foreign, exotic, you know? Note the use of the word thinks here. The girl doesn't have to be foreign, only appear or seem that way to Vetroni. Oh, and one more thing. The only way he's going to get it off, Priscilla says, is to have you crawl around the floor, talk bad to you, spit on you, things like that. So, Vetroni, reportedly, is also a sadist. Now that Coffy knows Vetroni's kink, she knows his weakness. Coffy asks Priscilla, where does King George find girls who will do that kind of an act? An act. Coffy, at this point, believes that Vetroni's kink is a kind of make-believe, a game of pretend. That certainly makes the kink sound benign, but as Coffy will discover, it may not be. To get Vetroni's attention, it's not enough for Coffy to present as the voluptuous black woman that she is. To appear exotic, she passes herself off as Jamaican. And, not unlike Miami Vice detective Ricardo Tubbs, she apparently thinks that a phony accent and saying "mon" a lot will fool everyone around her. When Vetroni watches Coffy as Mystique fight with the other prostitutes, he cannot contain his excitement. He calls Coffy a wild animal and a wildcat from a tropical jungle, which could mean that he sees her as primal, therefore exotic. And because Vetroni is a sadist, he may be sexually aroused by the thought of dominating a strong woman, a strong black woman, or a strong foreign woman. Eventually, Coffy gets her time alone with Vetroni, and when she seduces him, she appeals to him with a racist stereotype. Coffy puts her hand on Vetroni's erection and asks him, "Are you sure you don't have a little black in you?" That might be the wrong thing to say to Arturo Vetroni. Vetroni does not appear to be moved by Mystique's come-on. He takes her hand away, as if he doesn't want her to be in control. Behind bedroom doors, we witness the ugly truth, that Vetroni's sadistic foreplay is fueled by a vicious racism. Vetroni bends Coffy's wrists, forcing her to the floor. He spits on her. He calls her a no-good N-word bitch. And he tells her from the bed, "Let me see you crawl over here, you black trash." Coffy appears reluctant. Perhaps she has discovered that when someone spits on you and calls you trash, it no longer matters whether it's an act or not. Vetroni, for a moment, appears to break character. In a hushed voice, he tells her, "I'm not going to hurt you." But he just did, physically and emotionally. Coffy pulls a gun on Vetroni, but she is thwarted by one of Vetroni's bodyguards. What more Vetroni would have demanded of Mystique had their encounter proceeded to intercourse, we can only imagine. Now, we don't know this for certain, but I think it's interesting to consider the possibility that Vetroni conflates his racism with his sexual predilections as a way of expressing that racism without guilt. In foreplay, Vetroni is able to denigrate women racially and sexually while telling himself, and perhaps the women afterward, that it's just a game or it's just pretend. It's surely more than that, however. In his criminal enterprise, Vetroni must work with people of color. He needs them to both sell and purchase his narcotics and in the prostitution arm of his business. And yet, consider that there is no need for Vetroni's henchmen to kill King George by lynching him, and to do it in such a brutal fashion in broad daylight. Vetroni thinks King George sent Coffy to murder him, so Vetroni wants to send a message to those who would challenge him. But he could have just told his henchmen to just put a bullet in King George's head, quietly, neatly, and be done with it. But the henchmen don't do that. They engage in a very racist, very public execution. We only hear Vetroni tell his henchmen to hit King George, but I think it's safe to infer that the henchmen are acting on Vetroni's orders to lynch him. Near the end of the movie, when Vetroni is relaxing with Deputy Commissioner Ruben Ramos and Howard Brunswick, he tells them, "It does my heart good to see the various races in a spirit of cooperation." He is clearly being sarcastic. Vetroni is probably amused at the thought that the only way Americans of different races can work together toward a common goal is if that goal is criminal, and if it exploits and dehumanizes other people. As I say, Vetroni is not the final boss defeated in this movie. That distinction falls to Howard Brunswick, who may not be the biggest crook in the movie, but he is arguably the biggest racist and hypocrite. Howard tries to smooth-talk Coffy, telling her that he's had to do a lot of bad things to do the good thing of achieving a position of power so he can help his people. But Coffy has already heard Howard tell Vetroni that he is in this criminal enterprise for money. Howard is a prostitute. He sells himself, body and soul, for the almighty dollar. It's tempting to believe that Coffy shot and killed Howard because he was sleeping with a white woman. But I suspect Coffy would have shot Howard anyway. Why? After Coffy kills the drug pusher at the beginning of the movie, she has visible pangs of guilt. She killed the pusher and his flunky as revenge for them getting her little sister Lubel addicted to pills and smack. Coffy justifies murder as vengeance. Now, if a different mob boss were here, Don Corleone of The Godfather, he would say that what Coffy did was not justice, because her little sister is still alive. Lubel, in fact, is at a rehab center. We see no evidence to support Coffy's claim that Lubel's life is over. Further, when Vetroni's goons attack Officer Carter Brown, again, not killing him, but injuring him severely, Coffy becomes more determined in her quest for murderous vengeance. She is troubled by her conscience no more. Coffy engages in what psychologists call rationalization, that is, to assuage her own guilt, to protect her own self-image and ego. She recasts bad actions as good and necessary ones. But this is what Vetroni does too. It's what Deputy Commissioner Ramos does, what Carter Brown's partner McHenry does, what Howard Brunswick does, what King George does, and what all the prostitutes do. They justify bad or illegal actions because, in their logic, those actions lead to a good result: money, power, control, and the gratification of their sensuous desires. Racism is a form of prejudice. A prejudice is a feeling or opinion about an individual or a group of people that is based on something other than facts or reason. We all like to believe that our thoughts and opinions are based on facts and reason, but this is not so. We have prejudices, even about people we love and about ourselves. But we conflate those prejudices with other thoughts or feelings so that to us, they don't seem like prejudices. We justify our own prejudices to ourselves by calling it the truth. I imagine that is one reason why it can be so hard to get people to abandon prejudices like racism, because it's not enough to point out that the prejudice is erroneous or that racism is bad. It's because those prejudices have been connected in people's minds to rationalizations. So to ask them to give up their prejudices is to ask them to give up notions of what they think is good, right, and beneficial to them. Is that task impossible? I don't think so, but it isn't easy. I suspect that writer Jack Hill might have known and understood this. Otherwise, he might not have filled this movie with so many people who do bad, thinking they're doing good. Thank you, as always, for watching this video. I hope you enjoyed it, and we'll see you next time.